Yes, yes, yes. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. I'm welcoming you on the front end. This is just, please, wipe your feet before you come in, then find a nice comfy spot. There's plenty of room for everybody. It's 6:59 p.m. on the East Coast, and the rain is really starting to kick up over here. It's going to be raining all throughout the night, and going to have like upwards of 30-mile-an-hour winds. That should be really cozy. You know, for the time being, I'm at Studio A, but after my trek home, it will be a nice, cozy night. Hopefully, it'll be a cozy night if everything goes well here, and also afterwards. When we're done with this show at 9 o'clock, I'll be joining Matt Christensen for a little bit of overtime, as it is the first Wednesday of the new month. So that has become another way to mark the time now. Whenever I show up on Matt's show, another month has passed. So it's March 5th, and I hope you had a good one. Boy, last night was interesting. What did you think? Well, I'm going to give you some thoughts of mine in just a little bit. First, I just want to thank everybody for being here once again. I also want to give a big shout out to Keto Brainz for being our sponsor, a very, very prized sponsor of ours. And a lot of you, I sent out samples to, I think, over 100 people. And so many people are loving it right now. And I'm glad, because this is something I've been using for a while. And most importantly, Jay Gulanello gave me the okay. Well, I found it at one of his events, so it had to be all right. But still, if you want to check them out, get in touch with me. And also, in the description below on this episode and elsewhere, there is a Keto Brainz link. Use promo code Frankly. You get 20% off of your first purchase. If you become a sponsor of the show, I provide you with a 20% off every time that they have created, first and foremost, and only for the members of this show. So that's a big deal. Please enjoy it. I know you're gonna like it throughout the week. Work with it, work out with it on the weekend, garden, do whatever the hell it is. It only enhances you. Only enhances you. You become limitless, like that movie, Limitless, where the guy has no limits. All right, so here we go. We'll see about John Barber on Friday. He got in touch with me. He said he might have some complications there with the schedule, and I hope all is well. But for tonight, we're going to have a really good one. We got Brandon Joe Williams on with us from onestupidfuck.com. That's right. And we're going to be talking about legal disconnection from the tax system, from the whole matrix, actually. I got plenty of questions, because the last time we did a full-throated show on this, it was a lot of vague stuff, but I know enough of Brandon Williams's work to know that there's a lot of detail involved here, and I would expect this to be one of the first in a series of discussions, because there's no way we can get it all in an hour, and I would love to do just some shows where you guys are able to call in and ask your own questions, because there's going to be a lot of you. Really, I know there's going to be a lot of skepticism out there. I'm still, the jury's still out on me as far as what I think about it. There's no disagreement on the immorality of the tax system and how we kind of lost our country and our freedom along the way. No doubt about it. Divergence. But for tonight, take in something that could be really exciting. Really exciting. There's quite a bit of tax talk last night during the State of the Union, and I have more I want to share with you in just a little bit. So that's what we have going on tonight. We'll fill in all the gaps with calls and everything else before I get off around, I don't know, 8:50, 8:55, the latest, so I don't give Matt Christensen a heart attack. Every time I join him on the first Wednesday of the month, I show up at 8:59 and a half, and I can tell that he's like making buttons, as my grandparents would say. He's making buttons. So I don't want to do that to Matt if I don't have to. But all right, so what'd you think? What'd you think, ladies and gentlemen, about this incredible night of entertainment? Because that's what it was for me. I was thoroughly entertained. I really was. And I don't like States of the Union. I don't like it. I don't like the whole the long drawn out pageantry of the whole thing. Got to wait for everybody to walk in, 5 minutes between people walking in. And then of course the standing up, the sitting down, the applause, the back and forth. Everybody's running off of the same script. If you don't support the current administration, then you need to be sour pussies. Sour pussies. Mostly sour pussies last night. But you got to be sourpuss. Last night was something completely different, though, because so much has changed since the last time Trump did one of these things. I'm talking from a complete... There's a lot of cultural stuff that came through. But from a television perspective, if it's all a distraction, it was a very entertaining one last night. And you just need to be able to convey all sorts of opinions without actually saying anything, because everybody in the room knows, or at least most people on the ground level there, the members of Congress, they know that at some point they're probably going to show up on screen. So depending on if you're approving or disapproving of everything that's going on that night, you need to be able to say whatever you can with your face so that somebody at home can get the message in a nonverbal way. Although that level of decorum is right out the window now, probably forever. Do you remember the shock wave that reverberated out throughout the country in the media, in both Fox and CNN, when we thought that there was even a modicum of a difference between them all? You remember the shock wave during Barack Obama's tenure as president, when he was delivering a State of the Union, and someone on the Republican side of the room had the audacity of saying something like, "You lie about one thing or another." The shock that someone would ever speak up, especially to a black man. Oh, I remember that so much. And now I'm going to predict that within 5 years, the swashbuckling Democrats, led by Al Green and his pimp cane, are going to start sword fighting in between rounds of applause. There's going to be sword fights. You give it 5 years, there's going to be sword fights. Whoever's left over, whoever's there, I don't know. And what a pathetic moment that was with Al Green from Texas. Obviously, he planned to be thrown out because what he chose as a moment to do it was definitely rushed. He's probably, I got to get thrown out now. This would be, I want the cameras on me. I'll use my cane. Because back in the day, a lot of members of Congress used to bring I'll be like a throwback to when people used to bring canes. Ridiculous. Walks around swinging it, twirling it. Gold. He looks like black Biff Tanner. That's what it is. Just a little, I don't know, just as gropey too. You remember he was one of the people that we found out was had to settle sexual assault accusations within the Congress from that slush fund, the Congressional Slush Fund for sexual harassment. He was one of those guys. I remember that. And he's issued tons of statements about it, kind of like. But anyhow, that's what he was. That's what he was. And perhaps he thought it would be a really dramatic moment of protest from an old rabble-rouser with a cane, but instead it just seemed to me that he just picked a random moment. He wanted to just get it over with. It was so strange. Now, I wonder how many people saw that and knew the hell was going on. Certain feeds were showing certain things. Obviously, the CNN cameras, I was watching a little bit of that. I was also watching a little bit of what was being syndicated on Quite Frankly TV. So it's, everybody's trying to send messages however they could. Now, the women of the Democrat Party, they have obviously had enough with all the KKK comparisons because they switched from dressing in all white to now a girly pink. A girly pink. It's women's issues, something blah, blah, women, blah. Merely like a day and a half after they filibustered a bill that aimed to keep women's sports free of men, by the way. Now, we talked about the nature of passing legislation like that, but still, the essence of the bill is what was being the most telling thing about what people are fighting for and trying to defend, and it's just incredible here. So, but do they get that? Is anybody at home? No. And we'll talk about why. What is the actual mental block here? And because color coordination and screaming isn't enough to get the point across. They had these little lollipop auction signs, okay? And they keep holding them up, and some of them used black Sharpie markers to graffiti long left-wing memes all over their jacket sleeves. Just like endless scrolls of text that you would see in a left-wing meme. They actually filled up their jacket sleeves as if somebody from home was going to be able to or wanted to read all of that stuff in a couple of quick seconds that you're going to be on television. This is why they don't understand memes. You have to be able to convey something quickly in one frame. And I said, what is... I forgot who the hell she was. A woman with a completely flat face. I don't know what the hell her name was. Never seen her before. It looked like she ran head on into a brick wall. Face was so flat. Drop right off. Anyway, so there was that. And the whole way, no matter what was going on, Trump just prodded them. And it was hilarious. It was a hilarious night. It really was. I saw one woman write an article about how in this new era of Trump, it has brought a toddler-like fights to the House floor and all this other stuff. It's not Donald Trump's fault the Democrats will do the most irrationally humiliating things to themselves out of spite. It's not Trump's fault that Roger Rabbit has better self-control than the average Democrat, especially the average Democrat in Congress. I just don't get it. But, accountability is very hard to come by in the media. Especially when it comes to that absolute witch, Nicole Wallace. Now, they had this little 13-year-old kid, I think his name was DJ, and he had a 5-year fight with brain cancer and I don't know how, a dozen surgeries or something like that. They conveyed a honorary Secret Service badge to him and all that stuff, and he's honorary Secret Service designation, a 13-year-old, and Nicole Wallace had to find a way to turn it into some of, her own issues. Take a listen to this. Hold on a second. Let me make sure that the audio is good.
But I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. And I let myself feel joy about DJ. And I hope he's alive for another, 95 years, right? And I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And
that being said,
maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he.
But everything that comes after, everything that came before the but, you can just throw right out.
Never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of seditious conspiracy and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people.
Yeah. See, everything that came before the but, throw it right out the window. She hopes that this 13-year-old kid doesn't become a Capitol police officer and have to defend the Capitol against Donald Trump and then kill himself afterwards. Kill himself. Spun it into a January 6th recap lie. It's so ridiculous. And to actually go as far as bringing up the suicides, because of course there is no body count. There is no body count otherwise, except the feds killing and brutalizing people. There is no body count otherwise. And she better stop bringing up that those numbers there. Nicole better stop it, because I wish more people would ask more questions about that. Everyone wants to know about the pipe bomb on January 6th. Can somebody look into these suicides, please? Can you imagine killing yourself, leaving behind families because of the mosh pit at the Capitol? What was that? Omaha Beach? Seriously, to this day. I mean, that's where they got their body count from. So not only is he shitting on a 13-year-old with actual problems, she's using the most inexplicable aspects of that black op at the Capitol as the bludgeon. Just truly a fantastically despicable woman. She really is. She's a horrible person. Every time she does something like this, I can't believe it shocks me. But she works very hard at her craft. Here we go. Another one. These two are from RT. Now, this first reaction is actually from Simone Sanders. So you want to talk about a little bit of, wow, okay. Simone Sanders from MSNBC talking about how the bingo cards, I guess the auction signs, they had to go.
Yeah, but
how they gonna snatch it back, Michael, when they holding up bingo or auction signs?
I was gonna say, well, thank you, Simone.
Can we talk about it?
The bingo signs were killing me. I don't know who thought up the bingo signs, but they should be fired.
Michael, this is an indictment, in my opinion, on the Democratic leadership.
I'll say, all right, okay, Simone, for that one very specific thing. And then we had this from CNN. They had to report on the first readings in the polls after everything. 69% approval, at least when they were talking about this last night.
To the results, what was your reaction to Trump's speech? 44% of speech watchers in our instant poll tonight say they had a very positive reaction to Trump's speech. 25% somewhat positive, 31% negative. To the results.
That's just a little bit. That's a little bit on that. There's a little bit more from CBS. This was today. This was this morning, just a little bit after midnight. Most viewers who tuned in to Trump's speech made them feel hopeful and proud. Most speech viewers described the president as a presidential, inspiring, and more unifying than divisive. A big majority also called it entertaining. 74% entertaining, 71% inspiring, 62% said unifying. And everybody was like, oh, that's not everybody, but the Democrats who don't want to let go just yet are saying, well, that's because who was really watching it? It was all of his friends and sycophants and all that stuff. I said, you had Democrats switching parties to vote for Nikki Haley. You had Democrats who are willing to go out of their way physical burdens to go and cast a vote that you think might cause a little bit of a problem for Donald Trump in the state of New Hampshire. You think that they're not going to be answering an online poll, or that they're going to avoid watching altogether? And also, you have to take into effect how many Democrats are voting Republican now the last two cycles. They still don't do that. Definitely don't do that. So that's just that's incredible. So now, here's the thing. In 2017, if Donald Trump were to have delivered a good speech, you could have marked it. Maybe within 36 hours, there's going to be some kind of a scandal that was born in the media to throw a wet blanket on whatever good feelings were had right there. It's really interesting right now. Why I say this is unique is because that's not possible anymore. It's not possible. Now, a war might break out. Perhaps that happens, but that's not possible anymore. And the polls were amazingly timed because it only further isolated the freaks in the chamber and the freaks in the newsroom compared to the actual representative sample of the country, And I'm going to give you an example. Let me give you something here. What do I have? This is an interesting one. I don't know who this guy is, but this got around. There's two things I want to read to you before we prep the way for our 7:30 guest tonight. And I don't know who this is, but take a listen to this. It's about 1 minute and 10 seconds long. It might be from TikTok or something. And it's one man's observation.
I just want to know one thing. If you're a Democrat, for instance, how do you justify them not standing or applauding for any of the topics or things that he stood for? Like, how do you not stand or applaud when he brings up protecting women after the Laken Riley incident? How do you not stand and applaud when he brings out a young boy with brain cancer and makes him a federal agent? How do you not applaud and stand when he says he hopes to balance the federal budget for the first time in 25 years? How do you not stand when he brings up protecting women, specifically men and women's sports? How do you not stand when he says he wants to bring about peace and end the wars? You see the point I'm getting at here. How can you be a Democrat and stand for anything? Even if you don't like Trump, okay? The American people are watching this and they care about what your opinion is and how you stand with these issues, no matter who the president is. I just think that this party's done. I don't know what else to tell you. They've gone so far left, they have no answer for anything that they believe in.
What do you believe in? He essentially says at the end, well, I'm going to give you an example of something. We've been talking about this for a little bit, and I got a great example. And we can read something else here too. Well, hold on. Let's read this one first, and then we'll get back to answering this. Here is the last thing I have on all of this. Perhaps if we have any time toward the end of the show, we could take some calls about not only tonight's topic about taxation and the system, but also just things that caught your eye. And if we have some guest cancellations over the next couple of days, there's always ways and time to look at specific parts and do time for calls and all that. But Ethan Hyam MD said this on Twitter. I think it's a pretty good thread. Said, at President Trump's speech last night, I was sitting right behind the Democrats in the gallery. I had a perfect bird's eye view of everything. No doubt very dramatic for all those watching, but there was so much more the cameras missed. Not only did the Democrats not applaud or stand for the stories honoring average Americans, but neither did the guests in the gallery. Even for the most heartwarming moments, most stayed seated. Very few ever applauded. It was heartbreaking to see. During these moments, I could see entire rows of Democrats staring down at their phones. It was close enough to see, I was close enough to see what they were looking at. Most were texting or scrolling through social media feeds. The only moment during the speech that generated enthusiastic collective applause was when Trump mentioned spending hundreds of billions of dollars on Ukraine. There were about 5 or 6 Democrats that immediately pulled out their Ukrainian flags and started waving them. This was notable since their applause was not meant to celebrate any result of that spending, i.e. a tangible victory for Ukraine or benefit to America, but it was just in response to the mention of spending the money itself, and of course the mention of the 2 syllables, Ukraine. I added that last part in. The fact that this was so natural and immediate was unnerving. It was the only thing that pulled their faces away from their phones, not the celebration of life in our homeland, but death of hundreds of thousands in a foreign one. Beyond the applause, there were very few other notable observations. After Al Green started yelling and shaking his cane at Trump, the first-person security approach was not Green but Nancy Pelosi, almost like she was the pit boss for the Democrat side. Oh, that's another thing there, too. You always watch the Democrat leadership, usually old, crusty, white/Jewish people like, Chuck Schumer and or Nancy Pelosi and a couple of underlings. But they like to sit back like Emperor Palpatine and watch darker skin-toned women, men, everybody do all the fighting for them, like almost like, like rolling in the shit. It's a dynamic that always happens. You always have the younger ladies, white, black, whatever color, and then black men who just go overboard with the yapping and the screaming. And while all the leadership sits back and just kind of like watches and rolls their tongue over their teeth. It's fucking strange, man. It's really strange. The power dynamic there. Very strange. So describing Pelosi as a pit boss was actually a really interesting way of doing it. I can tell she was not pleased since I didn't even see her turn her head toward the security guard. This would have required Pelosi to look toward her right side, which was the direction where Green was embarrassing himself in front of the country. Not really surprised by her reaction, since this would have compounded the collective sense of defeat in the Dem side of the chamber. While the cameras were focused on the characters on the chamber floor, they missed the ones in the gallery. Like a young woman caddy corner to my left, it looked like they were dressed in sweats and fully passed out for the entire speech. And it didn't seem like this was an act of protest or defiance, but that she was actually sleeping, working her way through multiple REM cycles. She even used the tight seating in the gallery to her benefit, relying on her neighbor's shoulder and arms to achieve the most comfortable position possible for an extended tiger snooze. At one point, I thought she was snoring. Unfortunately, I was too far away to obtain audible verification. Then there was a young guy with a voluminous shoulder-length mullet, a Lieutenant Dan-esque military jacket, and blue jeans. One of the guys sitting next to me said it was likely one of Peter Thiel's famous tech prodigies, probably one of the top 3 coolest people in the room, I imagine. Then there was the entire row of mainstream media journalists, about a dozen or so, directly behind Trump in the gallery. What made this stand out was that they had time. They all had the same gray MacBook, which formed a wall of Apple logos. It was too symbolic for the current moment in American history. The irony was almost too much given the viral video earlier that day, which showed over 20 Democrat senators reading the same script, using the same microphone, producing one of the most cringeworthy displays of shameless inauthenticity. But the most remarkable part of it all was an indescribable energy coming from the Republicans. It was truly a sight to see such an impressive group of people from every possible background and every political persuasion coalesce around a shared vision. One of the most important moments in American history, and I was able to be a part of it. I will forever be grateful for Senator Hawley for having me as a guest. So that's one Ethan Haim, MD. Now, getting back to the other guy before, because that's a little bit more goes in with the dynamic of what we had seen on television. This is a perspective from inside the room. I want to pull something up for you. This is from our friend on Instagram, the Libs of Reddit. He does amazing work grabbing. He hangs out in our Gilded as well. He's always on Reddit and taking the crazy and really zeroing in on the crazy. Now, I'm going to give you an example of where they are as a group of people and why they can't stand for certain things and because the party is controlled and empowered by a majority of people within it. Okay, the party as a majority. I'm not talking about every average person who identifies and votes Democrat, but the party as a majority are unthinking animals. Unthinking animals. Sure, there's a big trickle-down effect. They are working hard on destroying and trying to control whatever sectors of the culture that they can. But they have no personal autonomy anymore. It's all gone. Every decision, every thought, every statement. Look at this. This is under the subreddit immigration. My legal versus moral obligation to a child. This is a teacher who says, I'm a junior high teacher today. And today a student told me that his dad hits him when he is a bad person. When asked to explain, he said that in the past his dad has pushed his face and neck into a wall and that sometimes his dad hits him with a belt. Usually I would call CPS for them to investigate. However, this student is an immigrant from El Salvador, illegal alien. Because if he was an immigrant from El Salvador, he'd be an American citizen and he had nothing to worry about. And I don't want to risk him and his family getting deported. I'm trying to weigh what would be the safest option for this student. I'm not missing a lot of information. I do not know the student's immigration status. I do not know if he's afraid of his dad. I don't know how bad it is at home in his country. My question is, do you think this level of physical aggression is worth the risk of deportation? Every decision, every thought, every statement that they make needs to filter through several layers of contradictory stances on what are, I guess, for normal people, common sense issues. You see a child is being brutalized. You're a teacher. You don't say anything because you don't want the family to, like, you're thinking about immigration. You're thinking about that. And that glitch right there, those broken chains of logic create these deer in headlights scenarios. That's what we're seeing a lot, where in the cases like last night, the safest thing for a Democrat to do in that room is actually just freeze and scowl, because it's just, at least it's a blanket negative reaction that requires absolutely no nuance, absolutely no nothing. You don't have to offend anybody. You can just show the world that you're upset. And like I said last night during my late night Twitch, if anything that Marley Hornick brought to this show to prescribe for fixing the state of our elections, if anything like that is taken up as a serious priority in this country, I would not be surprised if the Democrat side of the room dwindles to a third of what it is in a couple of cycles. Okay? We have a lot of problems culturally and otherwise, but I cannot yet accept that the United States operates under such low moral character that there is only a mere 5-seat difference away from that party in a majority. I can't imagine it, at least in the state that the party is in right now. I can't imagine it. All right, let's get this started, and we're going to bring Brandon Joe Williams right on. I hope you guys enjoy the evening. It should be a good one.
And well, guys, if I could still show you around, here is the biggest, gayest man in the world.
Wow. So gay. So gay.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's ride!
Okay, everybody, welcome to the show. Welcome so much, and welcome so hard. So, I just, we're going to jump right into this because I have been really excited about having our guest on that we have with us right tonight. It's Brandon Joe Williams. We'll talk about him just a second. Really excited, though. And especially last night, you know, we've been talking a lot about income tax the last couple of months. Either there's whisperings, is it going to go away? Is tariffs going to be the main way of funding this mutant government of ours? Again, what the hell's going to happen with us? Last night we got no tax on tips dangled, no tax on overtime dangled, no tax on Social Security, which is, wow, what a concept. That's like a triple tax at that point. I mean, it is literally, when we start talking about the way that the government screws us through taxation, it's essentially the meme of the power strip plugged into itself. And it creates this endless feedback loop of nuts. And we'll talk more about some of the most morally reprehensible taxes that we have on the books right now, maybe a little bit later on. But Brandon Joe Williams, he's a self-described lawyer, author, advocate for personal autonomy, known for his unconventional takes on law, taxes, and societal systems. We might call it the Matrix. I love it. It's good to have him on. I've been watching him for a while. Brandon, how you feeling tonight?
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man. It's just so... I've been waiting for this show for a good amount of time. And, you know, we talk a lot over here in New York about how to build separate economies on this show. We're talking about education, parallel ways of approaching education, healthcare, food, media, even. Can we not wonder or dream, I ask, about whether it's possible to separate ourselves from taxation altogether? You would say yes.
I'd go quite a few bit farther. Like I say on all the shows that I'm on in general, if I pay taxes, I go to prison. Paying taxes... When you learn how the law actually works and you learn the definitions of the words, you are literally one single word away. Every single time you pay taxes, you are one single word away from going to prison for up to 3 years. And that word is willful. So the only reason why you're not a felon when you pay taxes is because you don't understand the way all this stuff works. So, for example, every single time I go on a show, and I explain how all of this works, by the end of the show, the felony aspect of paying taxes actually activates for every single listener. And the reason why is because when you look at the actual, it's called 18 U.S.C. 911, which we'll go into if I can do a screen share.
You can.
Screen sharing is not turned on. I'll send a request.
Hold on. There you go. Okay.
And So I have to kind of walk you through a lot of things to get up to the point where we start talking about the fact that it's a felony to pay taxes.
Well, then, how about we start somewhere a little bit more basic? Because I really want to lay a nice foundation down with you today, because I know just from watching what you've done and having covered this topic or aspects of this topic in the past on the show, we're not going to fit it all in, and I want you to come back. So I guess the first thing here is, what does it mean to be sovereign? I want to just put this on the ground. Part A, and how do you distinguish that from being a citizen in the legal or societal sense? Let's just start with that.
So the definition of okay, if you want to start there, let's start there. Okay, fine. So let's go to my nation's website, and I will kind of read off some information to you that I wrote on this subject, because basically the first thing you have to understand is the difference between nationality and citizenship, right? So this is my own nation, and you might laugh or whatever, but it's real deal, and I can explain to you exactly how it's real and why it's real. It's actually wildly easy to have your own nation. You could have your own nation within just a few hours. No money's required. It's actually very, very easy.
Wow.
And in fact, if more and more people were to create their own nation, it would create a renaissance of love and peace throughout the world, because the definition of a nation is literally one that's at peace. People think the definition of the word peace means that they're not doing anything to anyone. That's false. The definition of the word peace is actually an action definition. And the definition is to spread tranquility inside the group and externally the group with all other nations. So if people were to realize that the only word that you have to have understood to have your own nation is the word peace, and if everyone started to operate using that action definition, the world will be a better place very, very rapidly. Okay, so with that said, there's two different layers to this whole conversation. Layer number one is nationality. Layer number two is citizenship. And we can see that in the United States Code as well. If we go to Title 8, which is all about nationality and citizenship and everything else. If you go to the U.S. Code, and if you look down at Title 8, which is where a lot of the information comes from, you'll see that the name of Title 8 is not citizenship. The name of Title 8 is aliens and nationality. Going into that farther, you will see here's all these subsections of aliens and nationality. You still do not see the word citizenship anywhere. Elective franchise, civil rights, freed men, alien ownership of land, immigration, exclusion of Chinese, the coolie trade, miscellaneous provisions, alien registration, nationality, immigration and nationality, immigration and naturalization service, restricting welfare and public benefits for aliens, enhanced border security, and visa entry reform. So as you can see, nationality is much more basic and much more first floor-ish than citizenship.
And it covers you as an individual, though. Does it extend to your home?
Well, we can get into all that. We can get into all that.
Go in order. I just didn't know. I didn't know with. I'm sorry for the distraction. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. So in terms of the federal government, because people don't realize there's also there's actually two different federal citizenship statuses, nationality / citizenship statuses, and then there's an entirely different kind of citizenship called state citizenship. So in total in America, there's actually three different classifications, two of which are citizenship and nationality. One of them is only a nationality and does not include citizenship, right? And even immigration attorneys don't know any of this information. What I'm showing you on this show is completely lost technology. I don't think even the Department of State knows any of this anymore, to be honest with you. So here is 8 U.S.C. 1101 subsection A22, and this is where we start getting into what is nationality, right? So 21, the term national means a person owing permanent allegiance to a state. This is the definition of nationality. Now, it's not the definition of citizenship. This is only the definition of nationality. Now, in order to understand the definition of nationality, we have to break down all of the words that are located inside of this definition. The first one is obviously the word person. The term person means an individual or an organization. So what does that mean? It means that, well, since this is my first time on your show, let's just go down and look at the definition of the word organization, which is in A28. The term organization means, but is not limited to, an organization, corporation, company, partnership, association, trust, foundation, or fund, and includes a group of persons, whether or not incorporated, permanently or temporarily associated together with joint action on any subject or subjects. So if you take all these words and plug it in over here where we saw the word person, then you have the definition of the word person. The word person means an individual, an organization, a trust, an estate, partnership, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Right? And that gets confusing for people because they don't realize that the word person includes all those legal fiction type things that are born only and exclusively from the law, not from a woman, right? So the term national means a individual or organization owing permanent allegiance to a state. Permanent doesn't mean anything. You can see here, 8 U.S.C. 1101 subsection A31 defines the word permanent as it is used in this subpart. The term permanent means a relationship of continuing or lasting nature as distinguished from temporary, but a relationship may be permanent even though it is one that may be dissolved eventually at the instance either of the United States or of the individual in accordance with law. So permanent, it's the same permanent you would use with like a marriage. It's permanent until it's not, basically, which is the stupidest fucking thing in the world. We just removed that because it literally doesn't even make sense that they even have this here. It's just, I just think it's here to confuse people. It really shouldn't be here at all. This word shouldn't be here at all, honestly. All right. Then we want to go over to the word state. All right. So the word state, we have to go to my website and we have to go down a bit of a rabbit hole to define the word state. That's actually more complicated than people think. Let's see. There we go. So we'll go to, in its largest sense, a state is a body politic or society of men. Then we go up to body politic, state or nation or public associations. Okay. I kept digging and then I found this. This is actually the answer to what is the definition of the word state. This word state and the word nation mean the same thing. So we're going to be looking at the definition of the word nation, and we're going to figure all this out. An independent body politic, a society of men united together for the purpose of promoting their mutual safety and advantage by the joint efforts of their combined strength. But every combination of men who governs themselves independently of all others will not be considered a nation. A body of pirates, for example, who govern themselves are not a nation. To constitute a nation, another ingredient is required. The body thus formed must respect other nations in general and each of their members in particular. Such a society has her affairs and her interests. She deliberates and takes resolutions in common, thus becoming a moral person who possesses an understanding and will peculiar to herself and is susceptible of obligations and rights. So what does that mean? It's the same way that a group of cells build a human body. It's a group of individuals operating together as a group, and that group is at peace, essentially, which the definition of the word peace is also here. We have to have that definition in order to understand what comprises a nation, because they're saying a body of pirates who govern themselves are not a nation. Another ingredient is required. The body must respect other nations in general and each of their members in particular, right? So then we go over to 18 U.S.C. 11 and we find out what is the definition in the United States Code of a foreign government. The term foreign government includes any government, faction, or body of insurgents within a country with which the United States is at peace, irrespective of recognition by the United States. So what is the crux of having a nation? What is the only thing that you need to have in order to have a nation? You have to be at peace. Now, what does that mean? It's very simple. Here's the definition. Peace. The tranquility enjoyed by a political society, internally by the good order which reigns among its members, and externally by the good understanding it has with all other nations. Applied to the internal regulations of a nation, peace imports, which means like shows or displays, in a technical sense, not merely a state of repose and security as opposed to one of violence or warfare, but likewise a state of public order and decorum. So what does that mean? The definition of the word peace is not some guy living in a log cabin in the middle of the woods. I'm sorry to say, I know there's a lot of people who wish that was the definition, who think that's the definition. That is not the definition. When it comes to international law, the definition is actually an action definition. And in a technical sense, it is not simply just being there and being cool and being secure and not hurting anyone, as opposed to one of violence or warfare. But it's actually a state of public order and decorum, and as we saw in the definition of nation, deliberates and takes resolutions in common, becoming a moral person, meaning the group as a unit becomes a moral person, and that group possesses an understanding and will peculiar to itself, and then at that point, it is now susceptible to obligations and rights. So what does that mean? It means that in order to contract on the international playing field, the group has to be at peace. Once the group is at peace, which wouldn't include something like a body of pirates, then at that point, that group is now susceptible to obligations and rights and can now freely contract as a person. We saw the definition of the word person in Title 8, an individual or an organization. So that's how an organization becomes a person. Now, once an organization has become a person, that organization can now have a nationality. How does that organization or person have a nationality? The term national means a individual or organization owing allegiance to a nation. So the nation itself can have allegiance to itself, and it would become a national of itself as a person. So the nation of the Amnesty Coalition is a national of the nation of the Amnesty Coalition. I am also a national of the nation of the Amnesty Coalition, and we have, I don't know, probably well over 100,000 people at this point who are nationals of the nation of the Amnesty Coalition. So that is an explanation of the term nationality.
You said you have about 100,000 people who belong to your nation?
At least. I don't have an official register, but I'd say at least 100K.
Well, you got to do a census. It's your nation. You have to do that. Well, let me ask you this.
It doesn't work that way because the way I set it up is it's completely self-governing the way I set it up. So all the contracts automatically break themselves under certain circumstances. So each individual contract is like a micro trust. There is no, I don't have to actually imagine an entire country that operates the same way that the blockchain operates, where there's already built-in rules, and if the rules are broken, then the contract itself that gives the person nationality is automatically broken like a chain link fence. It's the same idea. So I don't actually have to manually do anything involving the nationality of my nation or my nationals.
And just because going through these terms here, and I know that this is like such a important thing when you're talking about sitting down and do contract law or anything else like that. But just given the nature of your work, how it's all about being able to separate yourself and being sovereign from the system. I'm not to assume that you are actually a member of the bar or anything like that. Outside of the context of your advocacy, you're not a lawyer. You don't actually have legal services for hire.
You would need to be a U.S. citizen to be a part of the bar. So
okay.
If I attempted to become part of the bar, I'd be going to prison. And again, it's the same idea. If I attempted to become part of the bar, I'd go to prison. If I tried paying taxes, I'd go to prison. If I tried to get a driver's license, I'd be going to prison. Now, the reason why I'd be going to prison in all these different circumstances is because of 18 U.S.C. 911. Whoever falsely and willfully presents himself to be a citizen of the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years.
So did you? So when did you? You were born here, obviously.
I was not born in the United States. I was born in Indiana, which is actually not part of the United States legally. Indiana is actually a sovereign country. It has many contracts. It has many associations with the person or entity known as United States. That's part of my presentation. So there's two areas that we have to go to explain where is the United States. 4 U.S.C. 71 is the first one. All that part of the territory of the United States included within the present limits of the District of Columbia shall be the permanent seat of government of the United States. And then we go to UCC 9-307, and we go to subsection H, and then this one's even more clear. Location of the United States. The United States is located in the District of Columbia. So Indiana is not in the United States. Indiana has contracts with the United States.
Correct.
But Indiana is not in the United States.
Okay. Yeah, I was talking geographically, but I understand what you're talking about here, and it's going to be germane to the subject, no doubt about it. So, okay, so I guess the next thing I would say is, or I would want to know is, when did this start? When did these very stark legal realities start? You start stumbling upon this and putting them all together, because there would have to be a moment in your life where you had enough information. You said it's time to act. I need to legally separate myself from the rat race that everybody else is a part of. How do you? What was day one of not being a citizen of the United States for you?
Well, let me go through this a little bit farther, because I want to. In order to answer that question, I feel like it's only fair to the audience. We have to figure out what is a United States citizen.
Go ahead.
Which is pretty shocking. Okay, so we have this now that we've looked up the term national, which is also the same thing as nationality. So if you're a national of France, that would mean that you are an individual or an organization that owes allegiance to a nation or state, same word, called France, right? So when you hear the term foreign national, that means somebody who is physically in a certain location, but their allegiance lies elsewhere. It's that simple, right? And we haven't even gotten into citizenship yet. Like this conversation we're having right now, imagine the word citizenship and the idea of citizenship doesn't even exist, because we haven't even gotten into that yet at all. And in fact, it's a completely different subject. So we're only talking about nationality. When you hear the term foreign national, there is no citizenship has been discussed yet in that conversation. I am a foreign national of France. Okay. So my next question would be, are you also a citizen of France? Because that has not been established yet in that conversation, right? So what has been established in that conversation? You hear someone say, I am a foreign national of France. You've established that that individual, who is a person, owes allegiance to a state or nation called France. That means that their nationality is French. That's all we've established so far. We've established nothing more than that, okay? Now, when it comes to the United States, we have this next term, the term national of the United States. And this also shows you that these are two very different subjects, right? It means A, a citizen of the United States, or B, a person who, though not a citizen of the United States, owes permanent allegiance to the United States. So this one here is called a non-citizen national of the United States, which you can see on the I-9 form. I-9 employment eligibility verification form. You see this literally right on the I-9. Every single time you've ever gotten a job, you had to fill out one of these I-9s, and no one's ever seen anyone check box 2. But if you go down to box 1, a citizen of the United States, box 2, a non-citizen national of the United States. So a non-citizen national of the United States is 8 U.S.C. 1101 subsection A22 subsection B, a person who, though not a citizen of the United States, owes permanent allegiance to the United States. So they have nationality, but they don't have citizenship. Now, what is citizenship? Citizenship is now that we've established naturalization, or I'm sorry, now that we've established nationality, the next step is to establish subjugation. So the word citizen means that you are a subject of. You have given yourself to a nation through subjugation, meaning that you are underneath their laws in exchange for the protections and structure of that state or nation. So if you had non-citizen nationality, that would mean that you've pledged allegiance to a state or nation, but you are not subject to the laws or courts of that state or nation. But a non-citizen national may also not have the same protections depending on the way the laws are written. In America, it's actually really funny because non-citizen nationals have as much, if not even more, protections under the law than a citizen does. So people get mad about, people who are sovereign citizens running around saying that, they don't. It's like, but actually, what's funny is that non-citizen nationals literally have as much, if not even more, protection through the federal government than citizens do.
Interesting.
So a citizen is somebody who has given allegiance. Thus, they have established nationality, and then they've gone a step farther than that, and they've given subjugation to the federal government. That would be a citizen of the United States. Now, the problem with that situation is like many fold, right? And the number one issue is covered really well in this court case, Ellen R. Van Valkenburg versus Albert Brown. This is a California Supreme Court case. This describes what is a U.S. citizen. And in this case, they say no white person born within the limits of the United States and subject to their jurisdiction, or born without those limits and subsequently naturalized under their laws, owes the status of citizenship to the recent amendments to the federal Constitution. Now, when they say the recent amendments to the federal Constitution, as you can see, this date is 1872.
The 14th.
The 14th is 1871. They're referring to the 14th, right? And you can see that more as we progress through this. The 14th Amendment, by the way, is what birthed the U.S. citizen category. So that's why this is all relevant, okay? So if I were to translate all of this into English, it would be no white person born within the limits of the District of Columbia and subject to their jurisdiction, or born without those limits and subsequently naturalized under the laws of the District of Columbia, owes the status of U.S. citizenship in accordance with the recent 14th Amendment. That would be this sentence said in English. So already we know that Brandon's white, so that means Brandon can't be a U.S. citizen. We've already figured that out just in the first sentence of this particular case. We're going to go into a whole bunch more examples of this. This is just one of like maybe 16 total I'd like to cover, okay? Continuing on this, the history and aim of the 14th Amendment is well known. It was at that time. It's not anymore. And the purpose had in view in its adoption well understood. Yeah, in 1872. That purpose, now here it is. No one knows this anymore. So what he just said, you'll see in 2025, it's long gone. That purpose was to confer the status of citizenship upon a numerous class of persons domiciled within the limits of the United States, which means the District of Columbia, who could not be brought under the operation of the naturalization laws because native born, and whose birth, though native, had at the same time left them without the status of citizenship. So what he's talking about here is the 13th Amendment released the slaves, but then everything blew up because they had no way to access citizenship. And the reason why is because the original definition of a citizen from the Naturalization Act of 1790 was a free white man. So I have to admit, like all the liberals run around and say, systemic racism. I mean, I'm not a liberal, but that is true. For 1790 all the way up until 1871, the definition of a citizen was a free white man. And they actually go through if you look up the definition of free white man in Black's Law, it goes through every single culture and nationality and culture that fits the definition of what free white man means. And it says doesn't include Indian people of the Hindu religion. It includes European, Judaic, blah, blah, blah. And it literally has an exact and specific every single subculture that fits within the definition of the term free white person. So up until 1871, that was the definition of the term citizen. So what we're looking at when we're reading these is we're reading a shift point where they were changing the definition of the word citizenship from a free white man to something completely different. And they're trying to figure out what they're going to change it to here, okay? So continuing with this quote, these persons were not white persons, but were in the main persons of African descent who had been held in slavery in this country, or if having themselves never been held in slavery, were the natural born descendants of slaves. Prior to the adoption of the 14th Amendment, it was settled that neither slaves, nor those who had been such, nor the descendants of these, though native and freeborn, were capable of becoming citizens of the United States. And that was the Dred Scott versus Sanford case, a very well-known case. That case decided that slaves, nor those who had been any type of slave in the past, nor any descendants, which would be sons or daughters of these people, even though they were native and they were freeborn because of the 13th Amendment, none of them were capable of becoming citizens of the United States because the definition of the term citizen was a free white man, which was covered in the case Dred Scott versus Sanford. Continuing on to this quote further, the 13th Amendment, though conferring the boon, which means benefit, of freedom upon native-born persons of African blood, had yet left them under an insuperable, which means impossible to overcome, bar as to citizenship. Now, here's the kicker. This is it right here. This one sentence is probably one of the most powerful sentences in the world. And it was mainly to remedy this condition that the 14th Amendment was adopted. Now, we're going to go on to some more crazy cases. We're going to go into a lot more places where actually higher courts, even than the California Supreme Court, are talking about this and exact and excruciating definitions and details as to each part of this. But we've already established something very, very simple. White people cannot be U.S. citizens. It is a physical, political, legal impossibility.
Even to this day?
Even to this day.
I'm not a U.S. citizen.
You are not. Nope. If you're white, now you got to think, what's the definition of white?
What's the definition of white? Because
free white man, free white man. We can look it up. If we look it up right now in Black's Law Dictionary, I believe I can find it here.
Because about 70 years ago, I wouldn't have been white, and now everybody has white. Everybody's whitened up considerably.
A lot of this is very literal. This part, if I can find the definition, here it is: free white person. Okay, so this, I feel like this. If you took this into a court of law, it's you're I don't think. Anyways, so we'll get into this. It's fine. I mean, I've never gotten into this on the show. So free white persons. Free white persons referred to in the Naturalization Act as amended by Act July 14th, 1870, which is right around the 14th Amendment, has meaning naturally given when it was first given in this other sector, meaning all persons belonging to the European races then commonly counted as white, and their descendants, including such descendants in other countries to which they have emigrated with an E, So you can see here, it includes all European Jews, more or less intermixed with peoples of Celtic, Scandinavian, Teutonic, Iberian, Latin, Greek, and Slavic descent. We're right here for anyone that can see. Let me see if I can highlight this. Here we go.
Yep.
It includes Magyars, Lapps, and Finns, and the Baskis, and the Albanians. It includes the mixed Latin, Celtic, Iberian, and Moorish inhabitants of Spain and Portugal, the mixed Greek, Latin, Phoenician, and North African inhabitants of Sicily, and the mixed Slav and Tartar inhabitants of South Russia. It does not mean the Caucasian race, Aryan race, or Indo-European races, nor the mixed Indo-European, Dravidian, Semitic, and Mongolian peoples who inhabit Persia. Syrian of Asiatic birth and descent will not be entitled to become a naturalized citizen of the United States as being a free white person, nor a native-born Filipino. That's like, there's tons and tons of history on the Filipino stuff because they were a territory, I think, for a while.
Yeah.
And then they weren't, and that's a whole massive, I'm not even going to try to get into that rabbit hole right now.
Right,
Look at this one. Nor a native of India who belonged to the Hindu race. We also have the definition of free women of color. Up to the time of the Civil War, applied to all persons not of the white race, including Indians. Freedman, freedom. So as you can see, we're starting to get into all these things. But the definition of what a citizen was up until 1870, 1871 was right here, all of this.
Okay. Now, so because I'm starting to watch the clock here, and I really want to get around to some real big tax meat before we have to get off tonight. Because like I said before, I am committed to this being an anthology of talks because it's very interesting to me, and it's something I've never dove into with this kind of detail, and it is a lot of detail. For someone,
yeah, so that's all right. I have another 20 minutes or so. I can get to that.
Okay,
20 minutes,
I guess my whole thing here is that we often talk about how this is not the country our founders charted, and it's a sneaky counterfeit. But are you coming from a standpoint of your issue is with all aspects of the 1787 Constitution itself, or some divergence farther down the line? Because I've talked to people who are declare themselves sovereign, and they talk about 19th century divergence from the Constitution our forefathers gave us, and others are just a little bit more from an anarcho-capitalist standpoint, where they want to live in a stateless society across the board, so they naturally gravitate to incorporating this part of their philosophy of the world. So I just wonder where you come from and how that all came to being.
I don't have an opinion on anything. I just operate off of what I am. What makes me so unique is I am entirely objective, meaning I just operate off what is. I don't operate off of what I believe or what I think or my opinion.
Okay.
I operate off of the actual functionality of the world that we're actually living in. So, for example, the actual reality of the actual world that we're living in is that in order to pay federal income taxes, I would need to say that either A, I'm a U.S. citizen, or B, that I am a resident of the United States. If I say either of those things, if I say I'm a resident of the United States, that'd be perjury, a felony up to 1 year in prison. If I say that I am a U.S. citizen, that'd be an even bigger felony, and I'd be going to prison up to 3 years. So in order to pay federal income taxes, I would have to commit either up to 1 year perjury or up to 3 year perjury felony. Those are the only two options I have if I would like to pay federal income taxes. Now, objectively, I do not want to commit a felony and go to prison for 1 year. And objectively, I do not want to commit a felony and go to prison for up to 3 years. So I choose to, instead of committing felonies, I simply do not file tax returns. Very simple.
So
it's not my opinion. I'm not upset about it. I'm not angry about it. I'm not I'm not happy about it. I'm not ecstatic about it. I just simply do not want to commit felonies. To me, it's very, very simple. I don't stab someone because I don't want to commit a felony and go to prison. It's the exact same mentality.
You know, but and I don't want to skip over anything here too, but when we see I was actually surprised how few people go to jail or sentenced on tax fraud offenses over the course of a year. I thought for sure it'd be in the thousands or something like that, but it's actually less than 500 a year or something like that. I never saw felony charges for perjury before, for stating that you're a citizen when you're giving money to the government. I can see how that becomes a real technical reality and a legal reality once you put forward the stuff the terminology and everything else there too. But I've never actually. Have you seen you know of that happening where somebody?
It's never happened and it never will. But the thing is that regardless of whether I will be prosecuted, I don't want to commit a felony that could open me up to future prosecution. Just because you may never get busted for stabbing someone doesn't mean you should.
Okay. So then I guess my original question about the 1787 Constitution, is that contractually sound or
the original Constitution that everyone thinks they have has absolutely nothing to do with you if you tell the government or anyone else that you are a U.S. citizen. When you tell someone that you're a U.S. citizen, that means that you are a released slave that was released by the 13th Amendment that had no citizenship. The government created a special kind of citizenship. They don't have rights. They have what's called privileges and immunities. When you tell the government that you are a U.S. citizen, you are telling them that you are actually living in the District of Columbia or one of its U.S. territories or insular possessions, such as American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands, something like that, right? If you tell the government that you are a U.S. citizen, you are essentially naturalizing and establishing both nationality and citizenship with the District of Columbia. The District of Columbia is an entirely different country from the United States of America. So the United States of America is these 50 independent nation states, and then there's a whole other country called United States, which is the District of Columbia, Guam, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Northern Mariana Islands, and then there's also, I think, 9 other uninhabited U.S. territories and insular possessions, and
soon Greenland.
Well, yeah. Well, that if Greenland is purchased and it becomes a possession of the United States, so for example, if you go down the history of our country, many states were actually territories before they were states. If they're territories, they were underneath the person called United States, which is the District of Columbia. Once they become a state is sovereign. So California is entirely sovereign from United States. Utah is entirely sovereign from United States. American Samoa, Guam, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the Northern Mariana Islands are not sovereign from United States. They are U.S. territories or insular possessions. And if you want to get into that more, all you got to do is just go to the United States Code.
Yeah.
And just go to any title and then go back to the beginning of the United States Code to where it has all the individual titles. You're going to scroll down to, I believe, Title 48, Territories and Insular Possessions. You're going to click on that, and then it will tell you and have subsections for each area of which either is or was a U.S. territory or insular possession. Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Philippine Islands, Canal Zone, talking about Panama, Guano Islands, Guam, Samoa, Tutuila, Manula, Swains Islands, Trust Territories of the Pacific Islands, Territorial Provision, that's not it, Virgin Islands, Eastern Samoa, Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, Northern Mariana Islands, Micronesia, Marshall Islands, Palau. Those are all the areas that are listed as either. Now you got to think, are these areas currently U.S. territories and insular possessions? Were they previously? So, for example, Alaska and Hawaii, they were previously U.S. territories / insular possessions. I don't think they still are. Click on Alaska, and you go down, and what does it say? Omitted, repealed, omitted, repealed, omitted, repealed, omitted, repealed, 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 omitted, omitted, repealed, repealed, omitted, repealed, omitted, repealed, omitted, omitted, omitted. Now, the reason why I believe, I haven't gone all the way, this is actually part of current research, like right now. I believe the reason why it looks like this is because that Alaska was a U.S. territory or insular possession, and then it became an actual sovereign nation. At some point
it essentially came off the ledger.
It came off the ledger.
Right.
Hawaii, let's click Hawaii. Omitted, repealed, omitted, repealed, omitted, repealed, omitted, repealed, omitted, omitted, repealed, omitted, 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 omitted. You see? So what we're looking at is, again, I believe Hawaii was a U.S. territory or insular possession up to a certain point, and then it didn't, and then it came off of that, and it became its own U.S. state, which is a sovereign nation, right? Now Puerto Rico, okay, Puerto Rico has all this information. Doesn't look like anything's been omitted, and we're going deeper. Nope, nothing here has been omitted or repealed. We've got one here and one here, but overall, everything still looks pretty intact. So what does that mean? It means that Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory or insular possession. Does that mean it's a U.S. state? No. It is literally owned by the United States. The United States is the District of Columbia. So if you were to say it in more simple terms, what is Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico is property of the District of Columbia. Do you see the difference?
Absolutely. Yeah.
California is not property of the District of Columbia. Utah is not property. You can say here, is California within the exclusive territorial jurisdiction of the national government called the United States, which is the District of Columbia? No, California is not exclusively within the territorial jurisdiction of the federal government. California has ceded some of its jurisdiction to the federal government, such as federal land, parks, huge like national parks. Like here in LA, we have the Angeles Crest Park or whatever, the big, huge mountains and all the forests and all that. That's probably federal land. If there is a, what do you call the guys who roam around the parks? They're park rangers.
The rangers, yeah.
I think park rangers are federal employees. So that would mean that land of which they are policing would be federal land. So it's sort of like you're in California and then you're driving and then you go into the park. And then once you go into the park, you're essentially in the District of Columbia.
Right. We as far as the settlement of territories and organization into states, we go into constitutional issues a lot over here. And I mean, the establishment of national parks is not even constitutional in itself. So that,
well, that's correct, because the entire basis of all of this information that we're going into right now is through the 14th Amendment. And if you share my screen again, I'm going to scroll down here. You're going to see here the congressional record of the 90th Congress, which is from 1967. There's an entire section, the 14th Amendment, equal protection law or tool of usurpation. And they go into excruciating detail as to how there was several states that never voted for this, but there was a military insurrection that occurred, and they forced these particular states to vote for the 14th Amendment, but those votes don't count because the votes legally have to be done. They can't be done under military force. So the thing is that they go into excruciating detail and they give all the original information. Texas rejected the 14th Amendment on October 27th, 1866. Georgia rejected the 14th Amendment on November 9th, 1866, et cetera, et cetera. This is Congress telling us that the 14th Amendment, which is the amendment that birthed the entire U.S. citizen category, doesn't even legally exist. It never did.
So let's talk about this a little bit more, just so we can broach the tax subject a little bit deeper. When we're going to the 21st century, does the issue of citizenship, non-citizenship, who is sovereign, who's under the jurisdiction of one thing or another, before we get into state taxes and regulations, because that's a whole other animal unto itself, does the issue all start with the birth certificate, or what I would have to imagine is more? No, is it the social security number? What is it?
It starts with naturalization. I mean, it starts with the birth certificate until you become 18 years old. And then once you become 18 years old, it has to do with naturalization. So going back to 8 USC 1101, the same place we found the term national and nationality and national of the United States and non-citizen national, all these different things, we have this term naturalization. The answer to your question is right here. The term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of a nation upon an individual or an organization after birth by any means whatsoever. It's very mind-blowing. This is probably one of the craziest definitions I've ever found in all of my research ever on any subject. So what does this mean? Anyone conferring allegiance on anyone or any group essentially naturalizes that individual or group. So right now, live, if I confer the nationality of the nation called the Nation of the Amnesty Coalition, or New Zealand, or a micronation like Slojamistan or Malaysia, or South Korea, upon you as the host of this show, after birth, by any means whatsoever, I have effectively naturalized you into that area. Now, allegiance can be absolute and unqualified. And when you start going down into the legal definition of the word allegiance, it can also be qualified and temporary. So I could actually write up a pledge of allegiance, a custom pledge of allegiance between you and South Korea. And if I signed it and I placed it into a court case, in terms of how the United States sees naturalization, I would have just effectively naturalized you into South Korea.
Okay. Well,
this is probably one of the craziest things I've ever found.
So and you say by any means whatsoever. So a public decree on a show like this, that can get the job done. What happens
if the government or the judge or the prosecutor or an immigration attorney at the DOJ or your mother or your father or your brother, obviously I can go on and on, a police officer, a sheriff, a bailiff, some dude, a homeless guy, a baker, your mechanic, your pilot, if you're on a plane and the pilot confers nationality of a state or nation upon the group or upon an organization or an individual by any means whatsoever. All of those would be effectively naturalization. Now, it took me a long time to figure out how that works legally. How it works legally is actually very simple, but it took me a long time to figure it out. It wasn't until recently when I finally figured it out. We have to go to the rules of evidence, which is the same in most courts. This is the way that evidence is handled in court, and we're going to go to Rule 301. And this is the answer to how naturalization works. In a civil case, unless a federal statute or these rules provide otherwise, the party against whom a presumption is directed has the burden of producing evidence to rebut the presumption. Now, obviously, right away, we see here in a civil case, So this would only apply to a civil case, and a criminal case is different, but they oftentimes will apply this in a criminal case, even though they're really not supposed to, right? So what does this mean? If they naturalize you or presume your naturalization, then at that point you have the burden of producing evidence to rebut that presumption. And this is why this line right here is why people hate lawyers. This is the entire why does everyone hate lawyers in a single sentence. All they have to do is make up bullshit all day long and direct it at you is directed. The person against whom a presumption is directed. I presume you're a fucking woman, you're gay, you're a transvestite, you're insane, you have sexual issues, and you're molesting children. Okay. That would all be criminal, but let's say it was a civil case and I was suing you for monetary damages. The party against whom a presumption is directed has the burden of producing evidence to rebut the presumption.
So you have to prove guilty. You're guilty until proven innocent.
Sort of. It's actually really, really easy to combat this. Once you understand what they're doing, it becomes very, very, very easy to combat this. We're going to go to rule of evidence 602 and 603 is how you combat this. It's actually very easy once you understand it, right? So 602 and 603 is how you combat that, right? So need 602, a witness may testify to a matter only if evidence is introduced sufficient to support finding that the witness has personal knowledge of the matter. So obviously, you know and have personal knowledge of your own nationality. Duh, right? So how do you, as the witness to your own nationality, produce evidence? Because you have to produce evidence to combat the presumption. Mm-hmm. The answer is 603. A witness may give an oath or affirmation to testify truthfully. It must be in a form to impress that duty on the witness's conscience. So what does that mean? So if they pull a 301 and they say you're a transvestite, you're a woman, and you're a child molester, and it's a civil case, the way that you would address that is you would write an affidavit saying I'm not a woman, I'm not a transvestite, and I've never molested kids or whatever it is that they said on 301. You're going to write an affidavit, which is evidence, and it's that simple. The problem is if you write it in declaration form, their 301 will defeat your declaration. The only way you can defeat a 301 is through a 603, which is an affidavit. So if you write a declaration, which is all they do is write declarations. They never write affidavits. When you write an affidavit, you've effectively destroyed their 301. You've produced evidence, because an affidavit is considered evidence to rebut the presumption. So people think that they have to provide like documentary evidence. And that's the missing piece. The missing piece is you don't have to provide any documentary evidence. They've pushed the burden of evidence production onto you through a presumption. You can push that burden right back to them using an affidavit.
Okay, so here we have it. You confer nationality onto me or some other guest on this show right here live on everybody.
Now we've got a 301.
Now we got a 301. Then of course you can prove it. If you never write an affidavit and you write only a declaration, I've effectively naturalized you. It's done. Now your nationality in that case becomes whatever I or the judge or anyone else says it is. So if you have an attorney and he doesn't know this and he files a declaration, he just failed. The 301 has succeeded and you are now the nationality of whatever it is they told you were. Gotcha.
And attorneys never ever put in affidavits. So this is basically the whole game in a nutshell.
All right. So let's say
it's the presumption of your nationality, which is done through the definition of naturalization. The term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of a state or nation upon an individual or organization after birth by any means whatsoever. And then that causes a presumption in a civil case. That would be a 301. And then the only way to combat that is through either A, producing some kind of hard evidence. Obviously, any sort of evidence would work, but the easiest piece of evidence to combat this and destroy it instantaneously, kill it totally dead, is a 603, which would be an affidavit.
So you get past the affidavit. You have now established yourself in a pretty convincing legal way that you're talking about right now, and then it's the next morning, and it's your first full day as a naturalized person of so-and-so nation. What then, at that point, is the most critical thing to do first to not pay taxes anymore? There's so many other things that are on your you're not a U.S. citizen and you're not a resident of whatever. So the thing is that the only reason you'd pay taxes is because you're a U.S. citizen or a resident of the United States. So you just stop. There's just no action to be taken. You just go on as if it doesn't exist.
If I pay taxes, I'm either automatically either a resident of the United States, which I'm not, so that would be perjury, up to 1 year in prison, or I'm a U.S. citizen, which I'm not, which would be 18 U.S.C. 911, which would be up to 3 years in prison. It's either 1 year in prison or 3 years in prison. Now, keep in mind, it says up to 1 year or up to 3 years. So let's say the prosecutor wants to prosecute me for perjury. He has two choices now. He can prosecute me for perjury for saying that I'm a resident when I'm not. Or if he wants the bigger fish, he can prosecute me for 18 U.S.C. 901 saying that I'm a U.S. citizen when I'm not. Now, if they do both, now we have two charges, one up to 1 year, and then the other one is up to 3 years. So if I'm prosecuted for both and I get the maximum sentence for both, now I'm going to prison for 4 years total over two charges, right? Now, let's say he hits me with both charges. One of them gets dropped, and then we only have the 18 U.S.C. 911. That's all that's left. Now, just because I could go to prison up to 3 years does not mean I'm going to get 3 years. I may only get 6 months or 1 year or 12 months or 14 months. Up to 3 years is the maximum penalty, right? Now, obviously, I don't want to go to prison at all for any reason. So I would never say that I'm a resident of the United States. I would never say that I'm a U.S. citizen, right? I know I'm not a U.S. citizen. I'm white. I have nothing to do with the 14th Amendment. I was born in the State of the Union. Plus, Congress has already said the goddamn 14th Amendment doesn't even fucking exist. So there's like 9 different ways that I can tell you that I'm not a U.S. citizen. And then 18 U.S.C. 911, even if it was real, which it's not, if I tell you it's real, I'm going to prison.
Let me throw this up on the screen for you. I had referenced this a little bit before here. We're talking about, because now we're talking about prison time, but of course this is coming from a perjury standpoint. Here, let me put you up. Let me get the hell out of here. This is number of individuals sentenced to tax fraud offenses over time. It's from 2019 to 2023. And like I said, I was shocked that less than 500 people a year are put in jail, because I would have thought thousands.
The reason why this is because they only prosecute cases that it's like slam dunk cases. When you start going down this rabbit hole, they only prosecute cases that are like ultra slam dunk cases.
See,
like
okay.
Easy peasy. Like it has to have like a 99% rate that it's going to go through. And the reason why is because they can't have people getting sued for this stuff and then they can't lose these cases. So if there's even like a 95% chance that they'll win, they probably won't prosecute. It has to be like almost virtually 100%, because they need to make sure they keep that 100% super high prosecution rate.
I was going to ask you, what are these people doing wrong? But
there's a lot of ways. There's the 861 exemption argument, which I'm not going to get into because it's just crap. I'm sorry. I mean, it comes from some cool people who care and who, but it's just a terrible argument. 861 is saying, I am a U.S. citizen. I am a resident of the United States, but there are certain exemptions that I can get that I have. So they're saying I am these things, which already they're felons. And then now we're getting into this exemption clause, which is just absolutely awful, right? A lot of people get in trouble for that. That's what Wesley Snipes got hit with, the 861.
Yeah.
It's a terrible argument. 861 is absolutely awful. I do not recommend that anyone use an 861. So whenever you hear the word exemption, what that means is it's actually very interesting and very simple in the law. Exemption means, yes, I'm underneath this like body of law or codes or whatever it is we're speaking about. Like the overall umbrella, I'm under it. But there are certain areas within this umbrella that are exemptions from the rule. So you got to go in and then say, but I'm out because of these things. That's the definition of the word exemption, right? I don't ever use that term because I don't have to do anything with exemption. I'm foreign. So foreign means this whole umbrella, I'm not even in the goddamn thing to begin with. So if I heard the word exemption, that has nothing to do with me. So an 861 would have nothing to do with me because I'm not in something of which where I need an exemption. For example, the 861 is about what is gross income for a taxpayer versus what is not gross income for a taxpayer, right? So the 861, if I use an 861, I'm going to prison for up to 3 years if they prosecute me for saying that I'm a U.S. citizen when I'm not, or they can prosecute me for saying that I'm a resident of the United States when I'm not. So if I use an 861, they don't even need to fight the 861. They could say, oh, because you're using an 861, you're saying you're a U.S. citizen, 18 U.S.C. 911, now we're going to have criminal prosecution for that instead, and then now we're going to get you to go to jail for 3 years for saying you're a U.S. citizen when you're not.
See, these are the things that I would think that the United States, that the lawfare that would be launched would be more so about preserving the income that is being taken from people instead of going after people for perjury. I would think that any even a small subset of people like yourself who are trying to get this message out to people would be primary targets. That's where I would feel like a government would put its gaze on there too, is to try to rebuff people like you so that this message doesn't get out. Do you encounter a lot of this?
Absolutely not.
Never.
I sued the government. I'm talking with DOJ attorneys on the phone. I wrote bar complaints about DOJ attorneys. I just had an email I shot out today because I wrote a bar complaint on 4 DOJ attorneys. I got the report back from the bar. They said that they're not going to prosecute it. I said, yes, you are, motherfucker. They're committing fraud. And then inside the document that they sent me, it said that if you're unhappy with this, you can actually, they have like a bar appeals called the CRU unit. I forget what it stands for. I wrote an email to the CRU unit. I sent everything in. I said, this needs to get moved up to a higher unit because these DOJ attorneys are committing fraud. So I send reports to the Inspector General Network at the DOJ. I'm going to start to, there's a way that you can actually file complaints on judges. You actually file the complaint. I forget what, it's like 28 USC 351 or something. There's a whole system where you can actually write a complaint to the chief judge of the appeals circuit of which you're in. And you can write a whole complaint as to like, what the problem is and all this kind of stuff. And so I'm learning all of this slowly but surely. I'm doing all of these things, and I've never had a single issue. The IRS sent me some bills recently. There's actually a way that you can get the IRS to actually pay your IRS bills for you. I know that's kind of wild. They actually tell you how to do it in the Internal Revenue Manual. So I simply followed all of their directions. I sent in all the bills. I approved the campus to settle the account of the taxpayer using a bill of exchange or registered bill of exchange on Fedwire. That's the exact terminology that they have in the IRM. So I authorized the IRS to pay my bills for me, and I have not heard from the IRS since. They received that
when you say bills, you're talking about
IRS bills.
Like income tax balances or anything like that?
Yeah, they sent me 3 bills. They sent me one for shared responsibility program from 2020. They sent me one saying that something from 2018, and they sent me another one for 2021. Okay.
Yeah, they sent me a bill for $40.
All I did was follow the exact process that they have in the Internal Revenue Manual. And the way that process works, and I can show it to you if you want me to do a screen share.
Sure.
It's a lot of terminology that we're not going to be able to cover on the show because just like you saw, going through one sentence takes quite some time, and going through this particular sentence is going to take forever. But let me get the authorizing the campus to settle the debt of a taxpayer using a bill of exchange or registered bill of exchange that is processed on Fedwire is the exact terminology. So if I type that terminology into the internet, what do I get? I get the IRS website is the first link. This is the correct section that I'm looking for. So I'm going to click on this link, and now I'm going to type that same terminology into the find function. Registered bill of exchange. Here we go. So this is not so title 26. So let's just, I want to make sure everybody understands this. So if we go to the internal the United States Code, we have this thing. If we go to the US Code, right, here's all the different titles of the US Code, right? If we go down to title 26, this is the Internal Revenue Code. This is an entirely different, this is called the tax code. So if we click on that, we are now looking at the subtitles of the tax code. Saying tax code or saying internal revenue code or saying title 26 is all saying the same thing. We're not looking in title 26. We're looking now in what's called the Internal Revenue Manual or the IRM. How is the IRM different from the IRC? The IRC provides the legal framework for taxation in the U.S., establishing and codifying the tax laws that both taxpayers and the IRS must follow. In contrast, the IRM offers detailed instructions and guidelines to IRS employees on how to administer and enforce the tax laws outlined in the IRC. Does that make sense?
A little bit. This is Chinese. Obviously there's a lot of people who are probably, hanging on to dear life right now because this is, I almost feel like we're taking a peek into another universe. And
we are.
Yeah, it's nuts to even just conceive of it. So I'm trying to
the
hone
IRC is the big dog that basically encompasses everything going on internationally with the tax code. The IRM is guidelines for IRS employees on how to administer and enforce what's in the IRC. So imagine this, so you learned in school, we have the legislative branch and the executive branch and the judicial branch. So the legislative branch creates the laws, and then the executive branch gets those laws complied with, basically. You're looking at the exact same thing. Title 26 is the legislative sector, and then the IRM is the executive sector, and their job is to make sure that the IRC, which is this one, Title 26, is complied with internationally. So and that's the best I can explain it right now. We're just going to move on at that point, right?
Yeah.
So looking inside of the IRM, which is guidelines for enforcement for IRS employees, we have this section 3.8.45.5.10.1, bill of exchange. If a bill of exchange or registered bill of exchange is received from a taxpayer, bill, you can just say bill. I can replace all this text with bill. If a bill is received from a taxpayer authorizing the campus, which means the IRS, to settle their account using Fedwire. So what does that mean in English? If if a taxpayer sends in a bill and authorizes us to settle their bill for them using something called FedWire, send everything received to the following address: Department of the Treasury, Office of Executive Secretary, 1500 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. They give you the goddamn room to send it to. Room 3413, Washington, D.C., 22220. So what did I do? I got the document for you. I have a document that I wrote that you can download for free that gives you the terminology. It's very, very simple. All you're doing is authorizing the IRS to settle your debts for you. Simplest thing in the world. We're going to go up to, I have all these free docs. You should do my free course before you start sending in shit, because you need to understand things before you start sending shit in, right? I have this document for you right here. And this is all you need. What's the name of the document? Authorization for campus to settle the account of a taxpayer using a bill of exchange or registered bill of exchange that is processed through FedWire. I'm not making anything up. I'm just saying the exact same thing they're telling me. That's the whole first page right there. What's the second page? Section 3.8.45.5.10.1 says, this is all their words. And then this is all I have to say. I would like to take a moment to thank you for the service of which you offer to settle the account of the sole proprietorship/individual on my behalf using FedWire. Enclosed in this envelope are the original bills sent specifically to the sole proprietorship/individual named, we're not going to get into all that. We're not going to get into all this either. This is all financial.
And you're able to confirm after the fact that this balance is gone.
No. Absolutely not. They will never sound any trumpets. They'll never give you a receipt. You won't see anything anywhere. They just simply go away.
You know, there's so much stuff here that I got to, obviously we only have 5 minutes left. So that I wanted to get into. I have like 95% of my notes still remain. I wanted to talk to you about there's even this one, I remember this Judy Sellers woman who was sentenced in May of last year. I had to go and look her up again. And I didn't know, I want to know what you had thought about that. It was like millions of dollars. They call it tax fraud, but they use terminology like paper terrorism inside of there as well. I want to talk to you about that. I also, again, your Instagram is the most incredible thing to me, because it's mostly people who are sending in pictures of them standing next to beautiful new cars, and they're all talking about something called an endorsement note and how they're picking up cars and all this other stuff, and I'm wondering what the hell is going on. Obviously, I haven't taken your course, so I'm on the outside looking in, thinking, is this what the hell is the situation here? Why is everybody riding such fantastic cars or have I don't understand what's going on. So there's so many things to talk about. How much longer? I mean, how much more do we have to build up to understand things like that? Because we still haven't really gotten the whole scope of the tax situation. I'd love to talk a little bit more about birth certificates, about Social Security numbers. Then, of course, there's the whole idea of, you're talking about the state of Indiana. The state of Indiana, as long as it jives with its state constitution, can levy taxes there as well. Are you against taxation even on the state level, or is
the state taxes piggyback on? Well, we'll have to end here because I only have a few minutes. So if we go to voter registration, explains this really beautifully, right? So if we go to voter registration in the state of California, and we go down to register to vote now, you can see here, I am one of the following. And you're going to see the same thing in every single state, and they're only going to give you these choices. Now, with everything I've told you in this show, does Brandon Joe Williams have the ability to click any of these bubbles without committing a felony?
No.
That's correct. That is 100% correct. If I click any of these bubbles, I am a felon.
For those of you in podcast land, there's about 8 choices or so, and they are all asking whether or not Brandon is one type of U.S. citizen or another. And
well, it's a U.S. citizen is every single one pretty much. A U.S. citizen and this. A U.S. citizen and this. A U.S. citizen and this is pretty much almost all of the choices, right? So being a U.S. citizen is an integral part of every single one of these bubbles. If I say that I am, now again, like I said before, everyone's just 1 millimeter away from being a felon. If you go back to 18 U.S.C. 911, the reason why nobody's really a felon yet until they start listening to me is because whoever falsely and willfully represents himself to be a citizen of the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years, or both. Willfully. I represented myself as a U.S. citizen for a long time. I didn't know that it was completely impossible in like 1,000 different directions for me to have been a U.S. citizen. I didn't know that. I had no idea. I had no idea that it was like 15 layers of impossible for me to be a U.S. citizen. I had no idea. So I wasn't willfully and falsely representing myself to be a citizen of the United States. Once I understood that there's 15 billion ways that it's physically impossible that I was ever a U.S. citizen, ever, now it becomes willful, and I immediately ran out and got rid of my driver's license and changed my passport and got rid of my voter registration and went to the Social Security Administration and I sent them documents and then showed up and then they kicked me out and then I went back and I said, and I screamed at the lady. I said, I pushed 18 U.S.C. 901 up against the bulletproof glass. And I said, listen, lady, I said, you need to process these documents. I'm not going to fucking prison. You are. And she got really fucking scared because I had already been there 3 or 4 times. And by that point, I was getting pissed because you ain't sending me to fucking prison for saying that I'm a U.S. citizen.
Do you drive?
I screamed at this bitch. And I don't ever scream. I screamed at this bitch. And then finally, she processed the document, stamped it, and handed it to me. And then she never saw me again. So the thing is that I have gone through every single contract, and I have gone through and carefully cleaned up all the areas in which I falsely and unwillfully represented myself to be a citizen of the United States. Once it became willful, I became very concerned.
Right. Because at that point, you're going to be you contradict your affidavit. And all
no one is ever going to prosecute you for 18 U.S.C. 911. It's never going to happen. Not in a billion years. You could run around saying, fuck it. I said I was a U.S. citizen. I'm not. Fuck you. And they'll probably still never prosecute you. But I don't want to live that life. That's not the life I want to live. I live a very clean. People think I'm crazy. People think I'm going to prison for this and that. In fact, I literally have I'm probably literally the most legal and cleanest human being literally walking the earth. I don't mean that in an egotistical way. Every single contract, every single word of every single contract. If I get a lease, I go through and I hand pen adjustments that need to happen in the lease before I sign it. And then I sign it in a certain way. So it's just everything is laser precise in my life.
Well, we're going to have to do some more laser precision in episode 2 because I have so many questions, especially driving without a license and things like that. I did that, and of course, if
I get a license to drive, I go to prison. 18 U.S.C. 911, and you say to yourself, "Well, Brandon, they ask you if you're a U.S. citizen on the driver's license." So the first thing I did was I went down, I got a new driver's license because I was so freaked out about becoming a felon. So I filled out a new form, and it says, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" I said, "No." And they issued me a driver's license as a non-U.S. citizen, which I felt better about. At least I wasn't committing a felony.
Oh, okay. Well, that's something.
I had that for about 1.5 years. But then once I learned more and more and more, I realized that really only U.S. citizens even need a driver's license because if you're a state citizen, you have the Constitution. You only have to get a driver's license if you are a U.S. citizen or if you're stateless. So if you have no citizenship of a state, or if you are a U.S. citizen, both of those situations would require a driver's license, right? But if you have state citizenship, meaning like California or Indiana or whatever, you don't need a driver's license because you have the Constitution, you have the right to pursue happiness and to work and all these various things, right? So if you're a state citizen, you don't need a driver's license. If you're a U.S. citizen or if you're stateless, which, by the way, if anybody wants to learn about statelessness, you can type in stateless article Department of State into Google, and there's a very long, very detailed, very good entire archived article from the Department of State as regards to statelessness and what it means and how it happens.
Well,
so when you understand nationality and you understand citizenship and you understand allegiance and you understand peace and you understand all these various pieces, then now you can understand, okay, I'm the one that gives nationality. I'm the one that gives citizenship, right? Now, depending on how you give those things depends on what types of licenses that you need. For example, if I carry this gun, this arm, without a concealed carry permit, I'm just fine. If I carry this gun with a concealed carry permit, I'm going to prison. It's the polar opposite of what everybody thinks. The reason why is I had to commit perjury to get the permit.
it definitely pulls your whole life into a finer,
if
the microscope.
I don't have a driver's license, I'm okay. If I do have a driver's license, I'm going to prison. If I don't file a tax return, I'm okay. If I do file a tax return, I'm going to prison. If I carry this thing underneath my coat right now, it's okay. If I go and get a concealed carry permit and then I carry this thing, I'm going to prison.
I can't wait until the night that we can start taking calls from the audience and I can actually go through the questions segment of what I have over here, because I'm sure that we're not even done with the fundamentals, but it has been a really great time with you tonight, Brandon, and I have a lot of digesting to do. I'll probably be watching this once or twice myself, and I'll be totally prepared for episode 2, whenever that is, hopefully very, very soon. Let everybody know real quick where they can find you. If you have a broadcast schedule, I know you do a lot on your YouTube. You appear on a lot of other shows. Real quick, let everybody know where to find you. The URL is in the description of the episode, and of course, right underneath you on the screen right now, too.
It's a very funny website. It's all part of the joke because I try to keep levity here. I don't want to build a militia that wants to firebomb government buildings, which tends to happen pretty fast with this kind of information. So I created a brand to try to be fun and funny and try to calm everybody down because, again, peace is the cornerstone of every legal foreign government. I would like to keep my legal foreign government, and to do that, it has to be peaceful. Thus, the entire branding of my entire thing is onestupidfuck.com.
There you go. And you can, like, again, very, very great stuff on YouTube. Will make you think. I got a lot more thinking to do. But Brandon, it's been wonderful to have you on, my man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could take your calls right now, just you and I. There's so much. I'm sure that my inbox is going to be open, filled with all types of stuff. And tomorrow we'll have more of this getting together and digesting. Okay, so Jay Brits, thank you so much. I'm just looking at some other things that might be going on in the description. Oh, there you go. Cody says, even if this is true, good luck winning in court. The Constitution was amended to allow income taxes. That says Cody. Says also, if you're your own nation, then you don't have the same rights as U.S. citizens, so I wouldn't play with this. Another super chat says, Jay Semo says, this explains why the government wants to dumb us down. Great show. Thank you. Hey, listen, education opens up so much stuff. And implied authority, the illusion of authority on so many fronts, including what we owe from our earnings and everything else, is part of that. What goes away, what LARPed authority goes away when people are wise to things, especially wise to language. Anywho, we're gonna have to do that some other time. Thank you to the gold chatters. I mean the gold pillars. I see Sentinel. You take all of your gold pills and please send it to me. I have to go. Matt Christensen is gonna go freak out. Take care.
I'll catch you on the flip side.
That's it. Quite frankly, is just rushing out the door. I hope you all had a wonderful night. Thank you to our super chatters. You've been fantastic. Good night.